two people walk out of therapy on the same day. Person A can tell you everything: why they flinch when someone raises their voice, why they pick partners who disappear, why they still feel 8 years old the moment they freeze up every time the phone buzzes with a certain name, session after session in therapy. And they can narrate their story of blame like the national anthem. Person B never minds their own story for answers. Every time they feel the urge to explain themselves, to defend themselves, to make someone understand their side, they do something almost nobody does. They go quiet, and they actually let the other person's outside point of view on the situation land, even when it stings, instead of immediately defending the version of events they'd already written in their head. 12 months later, person A still flinches at the exact same trigger, and person B finds themselves experiencing the change they have always imagined. Here's what nobody wants to hear. Going in circles trying to understand why you are the way you are might be the exact thing keeping you stuck. And by the end of this video, I'm going to show you the two-part method that one of the most influential therapists of the last century created. A method so counterintuitive that most people, when they actually hear it, refuse to try it. We've been sold a story about healing, that it's an excavation to dig deep into the past, to find the childhood wound and name it precisely, and then you need to pathologize your attachment style. And finally, they say the pain will finally loosen its grip. Except that's not what actually happens. Not for most people. You can know exactly why you're anxious and still be anxious tomorrow morning. You can explain your parents' divorce in perfect clinical detail and still pick the same unavailable partner next year. You can journal about your patterns every night for a decade and still be running the same pattern on repeat. And here's the part that trips people up. That kind of insight isn't actually insight. It's a story you wrote about yourself until it felt like the truth. Insight doesn't erase the pattern when you're the only author. It just gives the pattern validation. One so established that you start mistaking the validation for self-empowerment. Here's the thing. I used to complain about this to anyone who'd listen. When I'd come home to my girlfriend, she was always on my case about chores. The dishes, the laundry, whatever it was that week. And in my head, I had the whole thing figured out. I told myself she was the uptight one, always dragging boring, responsible stuff into a home that was supposed to be for winding down, decompressing, and relaxing. Like, why is she trying to act like a parent? I could give you a TED Talk worthy breakdown of why she needed to relax and enjoy life more. And every single time she brought up the dishes, I still heard it as an annoying attack, a nag. I brought all of this into an actual session once, fully expecting my therapist to agree that I just had a partner who couldn't let loose. Instead, he asked one question. When they mention the dishes, do you actually think they're trying to hurt you? Or are you just avoiding being told that you could actually be in the wrong? And honestly, I didn't have a clean answer. I realized I'd spent months treating feedback from someone who loved me like an insult from an enemy, because agreeing with it meant admitting I'd been avoidant. And my habit to deflect helped me avoid the discomfort that he made me feel in that moment. I was person A, guys. That was me. So instead of building a better argument for why they were the uptight one, I decided to actually allow myself to be triggered and annoyed. I decided to not actually give into my reactions, even if I felt that I was giving away my power and dignity. Within a month, the nagging genuinely stopped. Not because I'd explained myself out of the pattern, not because I was no longer in control, because I'd let someone outside my own head tell me the truth, and then I'd actually done something about it. I didn't lose power. I gained responsibility. There's a name for what happened to me, and it comes from a psychologist named Paul Watzlawick, who spent decades studying why therapy works when it works, and why it usually doesn't. Watzlawick made a claim that got him in serious trouble with the rest of the therapy world. He said he could not think of a single case where someone changed simply because they understood themselves more deeply, on their own, from the inside. He called that kind of self-generated understanding first-order change. You're still playing the same game. You just understand the rules better. You can explain the pattern in more detail, defend it more eloquently, even feel briefly relieved by finally naming it. But you're still standing inside the exact same loop, just with better commentary running underneath it. What actually creates change, Watzlawick argued, is what he refers to as second-order change, where he challenges self-narratives, because you cannot see the frame you're standing inside from inside it. This was Watzlawick's entire approach with his patients, to not simply offer the same insight about yourself, but to offer the one thing you structurally cannot generate alone, a view from outside your own frame. Sometimes that outside view arrives through action and stepping up, like I had to do, against my own sense of pride that felt needed. Or an outside perspective challenges you to back off and step away from an issue that triggers your controlling sense of self. Sometimes it arrives through finally sitting still and letting someone else's read replace the story you'd already written, even if this means you cannot validate your pattern of thinking. Either way, it never arrives through more solo analysis. Write this down, because you're going to need it later. The demonstration principle. The demonstration principle argues that we are constant communicators, whether we are speaking or not speaking, whether we're acting on something or avoiding something. We never exist in some sort of neutral state, especially in relation to others. If you keep avoiding others, you are sending them a message, and not only is your silence a response to them, but your avoidance is the narrative you dig deeper within yourself. So what does this actually look like in your life? Let's make it concrete. You don't need to fully process why you're afraid of confrontation before you can send one direct text instead of three vague ones. You don't need a breakthrough about your relationship with your mother before you can put the phone in another room during dinner. And you don't need to journal about your pattern one more time. You need to ask the one friend who's stayed quiet about what they've actually noticed, and then sit with the discomfort of hearing it without immediately defending yourself. In every one of these, self-generated insight is optional. Action and openness are not. So here's how you actually use this, starting today. 4 moves. Stop the violin. What I mean is, stop narrating your pain to yourself and everyone around you for validation. The next time you catch yourself explaining the pattern instead of touching it, ask one person who actually knows you what they see, and let them finish the sentence without cutting in. Pick one thing, not all or nothing. Pick one small action that contradicts the story you currently tell about yourself, and not the biggest one you can imagine. The smallest one you could realistically actually do today. When you push yourself to unachievable extremes, you reinforce what's impossible or what's not worth doing. Show 'em, not tell 'em. Let the action of starting something new, or the outside truth bomb you just sat with, be the explanation and validation to yourself. Don't narrate it to yourself or perform it for anyone else's approval. The demonstration to self is the entire lesson, and it loses its power the moment you turn it into a habit that gets you by, but doesn't help you get through anything. Practice will be imperfect. So what? Explore change before you feel ready for perfection. Feeling ready is downstream of trying something over and over again. Repeat the new pattern messily and often, even if others don't appreciate it. That's how it becomes the new frame. Almost all change refuses to realize itself because we refuse to be bad at something new. Go back to those 2 people from the beginning. Person A can recite their whole psychological history and still flinches at the exact same trigger. Person B stopped defending their own version of events long enough to actually hear someone else's. And that's the thing that changed. Whether you already know your own story arc or you are still connecting the dots, what will actually move you forward is the same either way. Sitting through the discomfort of real insight, sitting through the silence, feeling your own convictions being ignored, and staying open enough to let someone outside your own head invite new beliefs. You're no longer measuring growth by external validation. You begin to use change and new emotions and direction as a metric of guidance. Self-improvement isn't a solo problem. It's a communication puzzle involving others, and you just may have been sending the message on the one channel that keeps you stuck. Change the channel, even if it feels uncomfortable, terrifying, and even offensive to what you know, and the message finally gets a chance to come through. To you and to everyone watching, stop waiting for the understanding to arrive before you act or listen. Let the doing or the listening teach you what the thinking never could. That's the demonstration principle. The only one of Watzlawick's ideas you'll ever need to remember.